And I want you to say, we've got the power. And then I'm going to say, what kind of power? I want you to say, people power, all right? Tejano power, okay? All right? And then, I want to ask you, if you've got that power, just I want you to say, yes, we have. See, who's got the power? We've got the power. What kind of power? Tejano power. Let's go. Who's got the power?
We got the power!
What kind of power?
Tejano power!
Are we going to use that power to elect Beto O'Rourke for governor? ¡Se puede!
¡Sí se puede!
¡Se puede!
¡Sí se puede!
¡Se puede!
¡Sí se puede! ¡Sí se puede! ¡Sí se puede! ¡Sí se puede! ¡Sí se puede! ¡Sí se puede! ¡Sí se puede!
Muchas gracias, muchas gracias. And now I want to introduce for all of you the person that is going to stop the pain, the person that is going to protect us, help us go forward, make Texas the #1 state in humanity, okay? Please, give it up for Beto O'Rourke.
With Dolores on our side, how can we lose? Better put, with Dolores on our side, we are going to win.
Amen.
Thank you, Dolores. Thank you. We started today in Nueces County, woke up bright and early, met Mario at the Selena statue right along the waterfront for an early morning run. Now look, everyone tells you that they're going to show up bright and early on a Sunday morning. Some people can make it.
Not me.
Some people had too much last night and decided to sleep it off. You were there.
That was me.
That's right, you were there. You asked me a question. And you brought your son, and you told me you were going to see me today, and you're here. Thank you for coming out. Yeah, thank you. But was Dolores Huerta. And she threatened to teach me the washing machine dance from the movie Selena. So I made sure that we started running before that could get captured on film. But I'll tell you what, we were with her yesterday in Brownsville. On her own, she went to Hidalgo County and McAllen to raise support for what we are all doing right now, not for Democrats, not for Beto, not for one party or person, but for all of us, because of the stakes that she just described right now. They could not be any higher. The moment cannot be any more urgent, and she wants to make sure that we're giving all that we can with what we have, where we are. And that describes the people who are in this room right now. It describes those who came out and joined us bright and early to watch the sun rise against these beautiful cloud bursts that were just exploding in the sky above us. It was so wonderful to start our day here, to realize how lucky we are to be alive and in the state of Texas at this very moment. It's wonderful. And one of those people who I think had every intention of showing up, who was actually going to lead the run, wasn't there. And I don't know my way around Corpus Christi the way that you all know your way around Corpus Christi. So there was this wonderful middle school student and 2 high school students who raised their hand and said, you know what, Beto, though we didn't sign up for this, we're happy to lead the run. I wonder if those 2 high school students are here. They go to Ray High School in Corpus Christi. They're right back here, and there's our middle school student as well. Thank you all for being here. We are so proud of you. Though you're not old enough to vote, you're absolutely old enough to help reach the people who can vote and who can decide the outcome of this election. Well, listening to those 2 high school students, extraordinary runners, great leaders this morning. They're on their cross-country team. They're just going to do great over the course of this season. They told me that this Friday, there was an active shooter scare at their school. They were told to hide. Well, where do you hide in that classroom? I said, was there a closet big enough? No. Did you hide under the desk as though that would do anything for anyone? No, we didn't do that. We kind of huddled in the corner. Was your door locked to your classroom? I think it was, I'm not sure. What did the teacher tell you? She couldn't tell us anything. She didn't know what was going on. Heard the same thing a couple of days ago when I was in Houston, Texas, in Segundo Barrio for an event that we held there. A young student from Heights High School went through the same terrifying experience that day that these two young women went through on Friday. And I could just tell and really just feel his judgment on me. Like, look, buddy, he's saying to me without saying the words, I don't get a vote or a voice in this election, but through you and those who have an opportunity to actually do something about this. It has been nearly 17 weeks since 19 children were slaughtered in their classroom, along with their two extraordinarily heroic teachers who had already sacrificed the best years and days and weeks of their lives to connect with those kids, to bring them through whatever trauma or challenges that they have in their lives. Those kids in front of them who may be on free and reduced breakfast and lunch, you better believe that that teacher, though she's not earning enough not to have to work a second or a third job, out of her own pocket very often pays for the third meal in the day, so that child has some calories to burn and do that homework that she's assigned. After everything that she has done for those kids, she had to give her very life in the hopes that she could prevent more tragedy, more suffering, and more death. Nearly 17 weeks, and a governor who has called a special session to go after transgender kids, a governor who's called a special session to go after teachers to try to tell them what version of history they're allowed to teach and if everyone's story in this state actually matters and can be learned and learned from. A governor who called a special session and then another one to weaken the right to vote in this very democracy that Leroy and other veterans have sworn their lives to and were willing to give them so that all of us could live in a country that is the exception on the planet today, the exception in world history, could not be bothered to call a special session to do anything to make it less likely that these kids that I met today will not meet the same fate as those children met in Uvalde nearly 17 weeks ago, or that my children, those three that Amy and I are raising in the public schools in El Paso, Texas, the same. Now, if you are like me, your kids are your conscience. You fear their judgment more than anything else on this planet. You know, I know, we feel their eyes upon us at this moment. They understand what's going on. 5 of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history have taken place in this very state just over the last 5 years. And yes, Greg Abbott was governor, but all of us were living here as well in a government of, by, and for the people, the very democracy that we seek to defend and to raise up today. That accountability comes to all of us. So I want to tell those young women who led the run today. I want to tell those school children across the state of Texas. I want to tell your parents and every single educator, we have your back. We are fighting for you, and we're going to win this election. Because we prioritize the lives of our kids over the interests of the NRA or the gun lobby or Greg Abbott or any politician or poll or other special interest. This one is about our kids, and we will do right by and for you, so help me God. One of the people, and though Dolores was kind and put my age at around 30, I'm actually going to turn 50 next week. And so, those of you of my vintage who are also runners know that this is what it looks like when you're running at nearly 50. So, as I was trying to keep up with the other runners who were under this beautiful sky here in Corpus Christi, or next door in Corpus Christi this morning, one of those that I was running with was a school teacher, was an educator, teaches 2nd grade. And we talked a little bit about this. We talked about the fact that she is so underpaid, took on tens of thousands of dollars in school debt for the privilege of teaching our kids, is working that second or third job, not for kicks or for extra spending cash, but literally to pay the note on the mortgage or to pay her property tax bill, which collectively across the state of Texas has gone up 40% since Greg Abbott has been in office. When compounded by higher energy and electricity bills, $45 more per month per ratepayer in this state, we realize now he's the single greatest driver of inflation in Texas, and no one is bearing the brunt of this like that school teacher or that counselor or that librarian who, also being underpaid, is under attack by this governor, wanting her to turn in the parents of a transgender child under the accusation of child abuse. I told you earlier, trying to decide which version of history she is allowed to teach, putting up with this bureaucracy, these hoops that she's got to jump through, when all she wants to be able to do is connect with that kid. She'll explain to me, we don't take hours or days, we take weeks and months to prepare these kids for a high stakes, high pressure, standardized test that in no way effectively measures their potential or the effort that I'm expending on that kid's behalf. I told her that I heard her, and this is what we're gonna do after we win. Not only are we gonna pay her enough so that she just works that one job, unlocking that child's lifelong love of learning, not only are we gonna make sure that when she retires, she gets a cost of living adjustment every single year going forward, because retired teachers haven't had one in 18 years in this state. We're also gonna make sure that she can use that valuable classroom time to connect with that kid by canceling the STAR test in the state of Texas. And we're gonna have some help because I'm gonna appoint a classroom teacher as our next TEA commissioner in the state of Texas. Another person that I was running / shuffling next to down the street was a retired Navy veteran. And she told me and reminded me that she swore an oath not to the president or to a political party or to a person or to anything other than the Constitution, the very laws that define what is possible here in this country. One person, one vote. And these inalienable rights that are protected no matter the differences between us, and that we should all be treated equally under the law. Now, all of us can get behind those ideas. It literally is what sets us apart from everything else in the world today. But she said, I cannot believe that I'm living in a state now, Beto, where abortion is not just outlawed, but that ban begins at conception, with no exception for rape, with no exception for incest. And this state has one of, if not the highest rates of maternal mortality in the developed world. Because when you foreclose access to a legal abortion, what you're also doing in many of our underserved counties and communities is stopping a woman from getting a cervical cancer screening, or seeing a family planning provider, or visiting with a doctor of any kind in the least insured state in America. So I want to say this. We are going to win this election because we are fighting for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, and her own health care. And I want to say this. That woman who was willing to give her life for us, she's part of the fewer than 1% who've signed up, who've enlisted, who put their names and their lives on the line for this country since 9/11. Fewer than 1% of our fellow Americans have taken on this oath, this responsibility, this public trust between them and this country that they seek to serve and to defend. We heard Leroy Torres a little bit earlier lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, something that you need to know, and Joseph touched on this, but not only did he serve in uniform for this country, served as a state trooper in the Department of Public Safety, and is now serving all veterans in this country, past and future, with his wife, Rosie, who I first met when I was a member of Congress serving on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, an assignment that I asked for, that almost no one in Congress wants, because you can't raise money on the Veterans Committee. There are no political action committees that have business before your committee. This is not the ladder to success that most members are looking for, but I wanted on because I wanted to serve those who had served us. And Rosie came forward and said, BETO and other members of this committee, Republicans and Democrats alike, people like my husband went over and fought these wars that you sent them to fight, did everything that you asked them to do. Were willing to lose their lives, and I know this is tough for us to talk about, they were willing to take the lives of others if this country commanded them to do that. But there were these things, these toxic burn pits, where they were burning medical waste and body parts and toxins and chemicals, and literally God only knows what. They were breathing that stuff in. And now that they're back here in Robstown, they're having a hard time breathing on the job with their families at home. I'm worried that they're going to die of these conditions if they do not get some treatment and care. Now, it's interesting. This, the wealthiest, most powerful country on the planet and in all of world history, spares no expense to send you off to war. But when you come back and you're asking for some help, to have a roof over your head, to connect to the care that you need, to be able to finish your education, find that job, or be protected in the workplace, suddenly your government is absent without leave. And so Rosie, just like these kids today, looked me right in the eyes and held me accountable. Beto, what are we going to do about this? And it made me think about the Vietnam era of veterans, some of whom are here right now, who, when they came back from service in the 1960s and early 1970s, a war that they were asked to fight that this country never understood, returned to not ticker tape parades or thank you for your service, but to indifference at best, and at worst, the literal outright hatred of their fellow Americans. Those veterans got down to business, raised their families, built up these communities here in Nueces County, did everything they could to help not just their generation of veterans, but the next generation of veterans, because in addition to the indignity with which they were met, it took this country 40 years to recognize that the Agent Orange that they were exposed to in Vietnam is the presumptive condition for the cancers that were killing them. 40 years for our country to lift a finger to help them. And these Vietnam vets said to me, by God, Beto, I will be damned if I wait 40 years for this next generation to get the help that they need. So thanks to Leroy and to Rosie and that Vietnam era veteran, they were able to pass the PACT Act in the United States Congress. Joe Biden signed that into law, and we're connecting more veterans with the care that they need. And so I want to thank you for your service today, going forward, every single day, everything that you've done, you and every veteran in here. We will not stop fighting for you because you have fought for us. Thank you. Yeah, I got less time. Let's continue the work that they're doing. In this state, 9th largest economy on the planet, a $2 trillion gross domestic product, $250 billion biannual budget. For some reason, you tell me a good one, I can't find one. Tonight, while we're sleeping in our homes, me in a hotel room, there will be veterans sleeping on the side of the road, on park benches, underneath bridges. And we don't lack for resources, we just lack for political will. What if we did this? What if we followed Rosie and Leroy's example and said, look, we will spare no expense, we'll bear any burden to make sure that every veteran is housed, has a roof over their head, has a place they can lay their head down to, has an address that they can put on an employment application form so they can get that work that will allow them to get out of where they are and back on their feet. What if we stand up our own toxic burn pit registry in Texas, just in case the federal government cannot get their act together to serve those veterans who have served us? And then this one, for those veterans who have waited to get into the VA and then ultimately do, and for their post-traumatic stress disorder, their traumatic brain injury, they are prescribed an opioid, which they fear they may become addicted to, and that addiction is one that they may die from, as tens of thousands of our fellow Americans have. And they come up to me at a meeting like this and they say, hey, Beto, I don't want to go down that way, but there is something that relieves my symptoms, that increases my appetite, that allows me to sleep. But to use it in this state makes me a criminal in the eyes of the law. I want to tell you, we're going to follow that veteran's lead. We're going to listen to him and to her. We're going to make sure that they have what they need, because we're going to legalize marijuana in the state of Texas. We're going to lock people up for a substance that is legal in most of the rest of the country. And we're going to do the right thing at the right time, save $500 million on incarceration costs, and raise another $500 million by taxing the regulated, controlled sale of this substance. And we're going to help those veterans. So listen to that. You know, so many people will define themselves by who they're against, who you're supposed to hate, who we should be afraid of next. We're defining ourselves by who we are for. We're for those children in those classrooms. We want them to survive this school year and only be focused on passing that algebra test that I failed 3 years in a row at El Paso High. We want to protect those teachers, not only from an active shooter coming into their classroom, but from these attacks from their very governor. We want to make sure that we have their backs and support them so that they can produce the future that we all deserve in this state. We want to be there for our veterans who have been there for us. Now tell me there's the Republican or the Democrat or the Independent, for that matter, who's going to take the other side of this argument. Who could be against that? Who could be against our freedoms and our rights? We mentioned women right now. We mentioned those in the LGBTQ community who find themselves in this state where they follow the law, they pay taxes, they serve in the military, and they're proposing a Don't Say Gay bill the next legislative session. The parents of those transgender children are accused of child abuse. Those kids might be turned over to Child Protective Services, perhaps the worst run foster care program in the United States of America. 32,000 kids in that program today. And despite our great wealth and resources, some of them tonight will be sleeping in CPS offices in the hallway, under the desks, atop the tables. In this state, and these things are connected, though it's not okay, it's legal, you can be too gay to adopt one of those kids out of CPS, even though 100 of them have lost their lives just since the year 2020 in Texas custody and care. Hundreds more have been trafficked, have been violated, and have been abused. We're going to elevate those children, make sure that they come out of that program not more damaged than when they went in, which is the state today, but elevated in a way so that they can fulfill their potential, live to their full promise, reveal their genius, not just for themselves, but to the benefit of all of us. And we're going to make sure that we treat every single one of us. It doesn't matter if you're gay or if you're trans, you're just as important and valuable to the people of Texas, and you will be treated equally under the law. That means in hiring, that means in adoption, that means in marriage, that means being able to rise to your full potential as well. You all with me on this? We can do this. We can do this. But this is what we're up against. A governor, Greg Abbott. I'm biased, but maybe the worst governor in the United States of America today. Everyone's got their own opinion. A guy, when the temperature dropped last February in the energy capital of the world, could not keep the lights on, or the heat running, or the water flowing, because it froze in your pipes, and then when it unfroze, your pipes burst and ruined your floorboards, and mold was climbing up your walls, onto your ceilings. You had to move out and stay with your mom, or in a hotel. Some people on the streets, tens of billions of dollars in damage. 700 Texans lost their lives. An 11-year-old boy in Conroe, Texas, could not survive the night in the winter in this state in the year of our Lord 2021. A 75-year-old veteran who could no longer charge his oxygen tank in his home because there was no power, went out to his truck where they found him the next day dead of hypothermia. And to add insult to injury, while you were suffering and freezing, Greg Abbott's top campaign contributors were making billions of dollars because Abbott pegged the price of electricity at its highest allowable rate. Gas soon began to trade at 200 times for what it had sold the day before. Some utilities went into bankruptcy. Others took billions of dollars on in debt, but every single one of them passed the bill on to every single one of us. $45 more per month on average per ratepayer in the state of Texas today. And guess what? The grid is still not fixed. There were 3 conservation notices this summer where they wanted you to jack your thermostat to near 80 degrees. Toyota in San Antonio, Texas canceled the 3rd shift in that factory because it was drawing down too much power from the grid right here in the state of Texas. Not only do we have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to wealth, but the energy resources here in Texas are unrivaled on the planet today. And yet we cannot keep the power going because the most powerful man in this state doesn't care about the people that he's supposed to serve, only his top donors, his cronies, the corruption that defines this state with his leadership today. Well, there's an answer to that. Not only must we win this election, we must weatherize and winterize every part of the grid. We must connect our grid to the national grid so we can draw down power when we need it. And those $11 billion that were stolen from us by pipeline companies and energy traders over 5 days last February, you better believe we're going to take them to court and get every penny back and return it to you, the ratepayer, to bring down your bills. I'm going to leave you with one number, and that is the number 8. And I want you to think about this. 8 years since Abbott has been the governor of the state of Texas. Everything that we just described, the grid failure, one shooting after another, one slaughter after another in this state, one school shooting after another in this state, that's on his watch. Wherever you see chaos, wherever you see inflation spiking in your life, think Greg Abbott. But I want to talk about this. Also under his watch today, we are dead last in the ability to see a doctor, to fill a prescription, to take your child to a mental health care provider. That means that today in Texas, more kids die of diabetes than anywhere else in the union. It means that our largest provider of mental health care services today is the county jail system, which the judge could tell us costs you and I as taxpayers $120 a night to lock someone up because they're untreated schizophrenia or bipolar or clinical depression without Medicaid expansion means that this is literally their only and last resort. And no matter how bad that care is in that county jail, that's where they're going because they have no other option. Well, there's an alternative to this. And not only does it mean that we win this election, but we bring back $10 billion of our federal income taxes in the form of Medicaid expansion every single year. $10 billion to hire more doctors, connect more people with care, ensure more of our fellow Texans, prioritize access to mental health care, and make sure that each and every one of us is healthy enough and well enough to live to our full potential. I want to anticipate 2 things that you're going to hear from Greg Abbott over the course of the next 50 days. This is his attempt to try to scare you, but I want you to remember it's been 8 years. This guy's been in office for 8 years. One thing that he's going to try to scare you about is crime, and specifically this idea that anyone wants to defund law enforcement in the state of Texas. So let's meet this head on, okay? In the 8 years that Greg Abbott has been governor, homicides in the state of Texas are up 50%. Violent crime in almost every category is up across the state. The governor, who when he was signing that total ban on abortion and was asked by a reporter, Mr. Governor, you realize there's no exception for rape. What are you going to do about that? His response was he was going to eliminate rape in the state of Texas. More rapes have been committed in Texas than in any other state. Our ability to bring a rapist to prosecution has declined by half on this guy's watch. And today, right now, there are 3,000 untested rape kits at DPS headquarters in Austin, Texas right now. Crime, especially violent crime, is up on his watch. And when it comes to law enforcement, who I think have one of, if not the most important jobs in our community, literally, again, willing to risk their lives to protect those that they serve here in Robstown or in my hometown of El Paso, Texas. When those officers asked this governor not to sign permitless carry into law. Because our license to carry program that prevailed at the time said, look, if you want to carry a gun in public, we're okay with that, as long as you get a background check, there's some vetting, and there's some training so that you're proficient in this firearm before you ever try to use it. By and large, it worked. It wasn't good enough for the NRA. It wasn't good enough for Greg Abbott. So despite police saying, please, Mr. Governor, don't change this, he turned his back on them, signed this into law. Now today, more cops have been killed in this state than in any other state in America, and gun violence is the leading cause of death for children and teenagers in Texas today. And when he brings up funding and defunding, let me remind you of this. 7 years ago, when Greg Abbott was the governor of the state of Texas, the police department in Uvalde, Texas, asked for funding for the radios that would allow them to communicate with their officers and with 911 dispatch. The governor turned his back on them. 6 years ago, they reiterated their request. 5 years ago, 4, 3, 2, 1. May 24th, 2022. Those Uvalde police officers were in that school at Robb Elementary with radios that did not work because this governor refused to fund them. They never got the calls in from 911 dispatch that let them know that there were kids and teachers still alive whose lives could have been saved. So, when you see the ads, when you hear people repeat the lies about defunding the police, remember the facts and know that for the very sake of the lives of those in our community, especially our kids, we've got to beat Greg Abbott at the ballot box and make this a much safer state for every single one of us. You all with me on this? In closing, I want to say this. Dolores mentioned this, so many of our speakers mentioned this. Look, we are a people here in Texas from the planet over. Some of our families came here, casi 15,000 years ago, indigenous to this land, right? Others were brought here against their will, kidnapped in Africa, brought here in bondage, forced to build the extraordinary wealth and success of this state, though they would never be able to participate in it, and their descendants today still struggle to be treated equally under the law and to share in the success that their ancestors built. Others came here as immigrants. For my family, the O'Rourke's, we were fleeing famine in Ireland in the 19th century. To stay meant to die. So we came to the one country that would take us in, hoping to do better for ourselves, but yes, hoping to do better for all of us. I want you to think about those who seek to come to this country today, and I mean right now, this minute.